My name is 𝐂𝐤𝐟𝐞. I'm an industrial designer. Welcome to my channel about product design and making. I hope that you like, enjoy, and become a subscriber. Make sure that you hit that little bell next to the subscribe button too, in case you haven't already done so. That way you'll be notified every time I have a new video. So this whole Amulet project got started when I was watching a little science fiction movie, and there was an amulet involved and it kind of glowed in the dark or something, and I thought, wouldn't it be so much cooler if this thing had its own life force and it could kind of breathe, or you could really see that it was alive? I thought that would be so much cooler. So I thought, what would it take to put such a project together? As a designer, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take all the ideas from my brain and put them down on a piece of paper so I can kind of visualize them. I knew that I wanted it to be kind of industrial and have this sort of stainless steel braided hosing that they use on like a race car, and I wanted to combine that with something super organic from the planet. I started out with a simple circuit that I found online for a blinking LED, but that didn't prove sophisticated enough. I ended up having to turn to my friend Tony and his buddy Vance Conway from Buffalo to come up with something that was a little more suitable. So we're going to the gem show to go find a stone for the amulet. Hey, how's it going?
Very good. Fill out the form, you get a chance to win $50.
Awesome. Here we are at the show. Check it out. Let's go see what we can find. Here with Chris and Janet, and we're checking out the rocks and
crystals.
And crystals, yeah. We're getting our crystal on. All right, so we got lots of good things at the show today. This, and the light shines through here really, really nice. Amazing when the light shines through it. I brought that prototype circuit with me that you saw before to the show, and so I could test out different rocks at the show. Once I found a suitable stone, I could move on and start modifying and building the mount for the crystal and start putting things together. The first thing I did was take a piece of masonite and just kind of trace out the crystal and make a basic kind of frame so I could get a rough idea of how things were going to be held in place. I use that simple frame and I do what I call a Bondo squeeze. And I'm going to take some polyester filler and I'm going to press it up against the stone that has some wax on it so it's not going to stick to the stone. And this is going to give me a very basic sort of frame that's going to fit the stone really well. I'm going to take that over to the spindle sander and I'm going to start to kind of clean it up a little bit and make it fit the piece. I want to make it as unobtrusive as possible, so it's really going to be kind of hidden underneath the stone. There's a fair amount of handwork and filing to be done here. Next, we're going to add some batteries because ultimately this thing has to be powered and it has to house the electronics inside the stone. So I want to add some batteries, and I'm using an existing battery holder, and here I'm drilling the holes so that I can put it all together and put the screws in it in the very end. So here's what the battery looks like fit onto that frame. I've already super glued it in place. Next, we're going to add the threaded screw studs on. These are merely some bolts that I cut off and machined the middles out of and made them a little bit more hollow. This is where the braided cable is going to connect, and you can kind of see things are starting to come together here, and the amulet stone fits right onto the backing pretty nice at this point. Machining out the mounting holes where the stone is going to be set into the backing. Spraying some primer on this thing so it can have a nice uniform finish, because ultimately this piece needs to be cast out of resin to be structural enough to be a wearable piece. If you've seen any of my other videos on YouTube, you know that I do a lot of resin casting and silicone mold making. This project is no exception and requires the same. I need to make one 2-part silicone mold of the holder of the crystal, and the other one on the right there is the flexible battery cover. If you haven't seen any of the other videos that I make on YouTube, up here on the right is a little link where you can watch some of those. Alright, once the silicone is cured, it's time to cast. I chose a resin that had a little bit of flexibility to it because it was going to be worn against the skin, so I wanted it to have a nice feel.
these are some of the parts that I cast. Ultimately, I ended up going with kind of a gold color, and that picked up on some of the color that was in the stone itself. All right, it's time to build the circuit. I built the circuit from the components in the prototype. I call this city building. To me, all those little components are like little skyscrapers in a city. It's like a 3D environment centered around this center, organic, all-knowing force. It's time to start assembling and modding some of the hardware. I used some Earl's straight speed seal hose ends and some flexible braided cable along with a quick release airbrush connector, and I'm going to put that all together. To do that though, I need to modify some of these stainless steel parts. They're just a little bit too bulky for my needs, so I take them over to the sander and I start sanding them flat to get them to the size that I want and removing the excess material that I really don't need. I use a Dremel and the parts chucked up on the drill press to kind of soften up some of the sanded edges and give them a little beveled feel to make them nice. Alright, it's time to start assembling this bad boy. First thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the contacts in the battery area. And then we're going to put on the battery door. This allows the batteries to be replaced should they ever need to be that way. We're going to simply snake the wires through to the other side to attach our little circuit city that we built earlier. And this is a pretty nice feeling when it works the first time. You're probably wondering, how are we going to be attaching the amulet stone to the holder itself? We're going to use some snaps. And we're going to do that by gluing the snaps onto the holder first, and I put a little bit of wax paper in between the two snaps to glue them in place. I'm using some adhesive, maybe like an 𝐂𝐸6000. Once that dries good, I take that wax paper out and I replace it with a new piece of wax paper to make sure that things don't stick together. Put the snaps back on, and next I'm going to apply some glue to the snaps themselves so I can glue the stone in place. I do this with a little stick so that I can carefully place the glue only on the snaps. The wax paper also prevents the glue from oozing out into the other side of the snap so that the whole thing doesn't get glued together, because I do need to take it apart if I ever need to fix it or service it. Here I'm just cleaning up any excess glue that spilled out or may have gotten on the sides, and I take the stone and I rubber band it on there and let that dry overnight. Finally, the time has come to assemble some of the stainless steel hardware here. I got the flexible steel hose and I am cutting it off to right length, and I'm attaching all the pieces that I modified earlier. I assemble these stainless steel bits just like you would on an actual vehicle. The quick disconnect airbrush connector has exposed threaded ends on the one end, so I need to make a little collar to hide those, and I'm just cutting off an extra disconnect end that I have so that I can thread that collar over the exposed threads and get a nice clean finish on the braided steel hose. Let's put everything together. Threading on the fittings here onto the holder for the amulet. This is the one end. Here's the other end. This is how the quick disconnect works. Really nice and simple. Fits the scale of the piece. And we have a beautiful glowing amulet. The piece is for sale, or I would trade it for a slingshot or a good 911. I really hope that you liked this video. It was a big labor of love and it took a long time, many months to put together. I also want to give a big shout out to my buddy Mark, who put together a photo shoot for this project, info below. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can click on the little icon on the bottom right of the screen to do that. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. Rock on. Click here to watch some of the other design and making videos that I have. If you'd like to have your music featured in one of my videos, drop me a line.